English translation. What would have become of me? July 12, 2026. I board the premium cabin of the Bright Line train that will take me from Orlando to Fort Lauderdale, and a kind middle-aged man, seemingly the train attendant, approaches me. He leaves a bottle of water on the table of the comfortable seats assigned to me, which look out over a large window. With the sunglasses on, I cannot hide the thick tears streaming down my cheeks. The first time I visited my uncle alone at his home in Orlando was when I turned 18. I could finally travel alone, and I made the entire journey from Lima by myself, with all the confidence in the world, specifically to visit him and my father's brother. Magno was my father's best friend throughout their youth. They studied at university together, but later, when my aunt Normita moved to Miami with her family, he followed her to unite in holy matrimony here. Then, the two of them decided to build their lives in the US, where they became parents to my two dear cousins. I had just finished high school and was about to enter university in Lima. I didn't know whether I would study architecture or economics, but my father already imagined me staying to live in the US for the rest of my life as a modest immigrant. And truth be told, I did not lack the desire. My uncle Magno had established a comfortable life there as a real estate agent. The point is that I eventually returned to Lima and studied economics, but that trip to my uncle's left a mark on me, because through his hospitality, I knew that if something went wrong for me in Lima, my uncle Magno would welcome me to his home in Orlando like the son he never had. And time passed. I returned a couple of times over 10 years. My grandfather, whose affection united us, passed away, and now the kind attendant serves me a glass of white wine because I'm traveling in premium. With my sunglasses on, I cannot hide the pleasure I felt seeing my uncle Magno. How happy he is in that little town on the outskirts of Orlando, with his house facing the lake, his beautiful family, and his tight-knit community. How good a time we had strolling along the boulevards and restaurants of his neighborhood. We bought a good white wine and went to drink it at the seafood restaurant, socializing with the waitress, who agreed to let me take pictures of her with my Leica M6 analog film camera. After I told her she was very beautiful, Magno had already invited her to the vineyard I owned with my father in Cusco, all expenses paid. I was afraid she would take the proposal as indecent. Yet after paying the bill, I got the impression that, on the contrary, she and the rest of the waiters thought we were aliens who had just stepped off an intergalactic spaceship, enjoying the sweetness of a good lunch with a view of the lake. A unique experience. And through my train window, I see this great nation that I knew would welcome me as a model immigrant if I complied with the rules of civilization. In the event that my father's business ventures didn't go well, certain point in our lives. And he, finding himself in the pit of failure, had decided to fire a bullet into his temple with the revolver I know he reserved for such a decadent and a hypothetical occasion. Then I would have had to say goodbye to my mother and my maternal grandmother to seek my fortune in this great nation, a country built by immigrants. Perhaps, young, handsome, I will marry an heiress and we will build an empire. Or perhaps a beautiful blonde American girl would fall in love with me out of genuine love, and we would build a prosperous home, faithful to disciplined work, with vacations twice a year. Probably I wouldn't have lived for 2 years in Paris. I wouldn't have studied poetry at Sorbonne. I wouldn't have read the books I read. I wouldn't have known the world I knew, but I would have been happy with the simple life this blonde could have provided for me. Much happier than when a few years ago and sunk in the deepest part of the pit, the herald who told me, "You don't love me because I'm poor," promised she would be mine. Because I know that under the conditions I lived in after they kidnapped me in Paris to return me on a plane to Lima, those days in Lima were going to be miserable. They were the consequence of a cruel 20-year censorship that would strip any mortal and their entire family of their sanity. Because my father had already resigned himself to the idea that I turned out to be the worst of the family. Examples are never lacking, for that's how they were born. Flawed, crazy, foolish, sick, and one can only pity them for what they are. That is why, when a good friend of my father came to the house, my father was filled with proud amazement when his friend told him his son had been promoted at the bank he worked. But when his friend asked me, and I told him I was a poet because I had just returned from studying literature for 2 years at the Sorbonne in Paris, and because at no moment in my life had I abandoned literature, my father called me to another part of the house to scream at me in private, tell me never to dare say I was a poet because nobody had ever read me, that it was just my madness, and that he was ashamed of me as a father, because writing 3 lines does not make someone a poet. From that day on, I never said I was a poet again, and tried to dedicate myself to music, something that would lead me nowhere. Because I couldn't fight my father since he paid my salary, it was my turn to be submissive, laugh at his cruel jokes, and obey his intransigence even if he was wrong. Because I understand that my family had suffered deeply from the ostracism and humiliation into which an almost identifiable censorship had plunged me for 20 long years, a censorship that politicians could not agree to live. It is when there is little time left before the train arrives at my destination that I begin to turn the same matter over in my mind. Would I have been poor? Would I have been rich with the opportunities this land of freedom offers you? Would I have been happy amidst my hardships? Whatever the case, I would never have been capable of leaving my mother all alone in any scenario. Happy or unhappy, would I be the same? Would I look just as I do today at my age? A faithful reflection of my maternal grandfather. I get up from my seat, put my backpack on my shoulder, head toward the exit door. And when I cross paths with the same kind cabin attendant, after saying goodbye, I managed to read the badge pinned to the chest of his uniform shirt. Mauricio, Employee of the Month.